You know that feeling when you finally grab hold of a dream you didn't even know you had, only to watch someone try to snatch it away before you can even take a breath? That was me, standing on the porch of a legacy, unaware that I was about to step into a war zone disguised as a suburb. It started with a key, a heavy brass key that belonged to a house I had just inherited from my Uncle Ben, a man who valued privacy more than oxygen. The property was a slice of heaven, sitting on a hillside just outside of town, with a winding driveway that felt like a secret passage and pine trees that whispered in the wind. It was just past noon. The sun was cutting through the canopy in these lazy, golden ribbons, and my wife, Sarah, was leaning out the car window with a look of pure peace on her face, while our 8-year-old son, Leo, was already sprinting across the lawn, shouting dibs on the room with the loft. I remember taking a deep breath, smelling the cedar and the old wood siding, thinking that this was it. This was freedom. No more rent, no more noise, just us and the land. I checked my folder one last time, just a nervous habit, tapping the probate papers and the county zoning map that proved, without a shadow of a doubt, that this parcel of land was independent, wild, and completely ours. I slid the key into the lock, hearing the tumblers click, and that's when the silence shattered. It wasn't a bird or the wind. It was the screech of high-performance tires on gravel, a sound so aggressive it made my stomach drop. I turned around to see a pristine, pearl-white Mercedes SUV drift to a halt right behind our moving truck, blocking us in with the arrogance of a tank. The driver's door flew open, and out stepped a woman who looked like she had been manufactured in a factory that specialized in intimidation and expensive blazers. She walked with a terrifying purpose, flanked by 2 guys in matching polo shirts that read Golden Oak's Conservancy Compliance Team, looking like budget Secret Service agents. She didn't say hello, she didn't introduce herself, she just pointed a manicured finger at my chest and dropped the hammer. "You can't live here. The board hasn't cleared you." I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. It was just so absurd, like a bad prank show. "I'm sorry," I said, trying to keep it light. "I own this place. I'm Marcus Thorne." She looked at me like I was a stain on her windshield. "I am Patricia Vance, president of the Golden Oaks Conservancy, and you are in violation of occupancy bylaws. This property falls under our jurisdiction as of the 2023 boundary expansion, and you are trespassing." Sarah had stepped up beside me by then, her hand on my arm, looking confused, and I held up my folder, trying to be reasonable. "Look, lady, I have the county maps right here. This lot is outside your subdivision. Always has been. Uncle Ben made sure of that." Patricia didn't even look at the paperwork. She just smirked, a cold, practiced expression that sent a chill down my spine. Maps take time to update. Bureaucracy is slow, but our standards are not. Get off the property, or I call the authorities. I told her to go ahead, thinking that the police would take one look at my deed and tell this delusional woman to take a hike. I was naive. I didn't understand yet that for people like Patricia, the police weren't protectors, they were just another tool in the arsenal. She made the call, loud enough for us to hear, describing us as unlawful squatters and aggressive intruders, spinning a narrative before the cops even arrived. When the deputies pulled up, lights flashing against the peaceful trees, I felt a surge of relief, thinking logic would win. But as I showed the older officer my papers, explaining the zoning, showing the stamps, proving my ownership, I saw Patricia whispering to the younger deputy, showing him a glossy binder with a map that looked suspiciously different from mine. The older officer looked at my papers, then at hers, and gave a heavy sigh, the kind that comes from a man who hates his job. "Mr. Thorne, your papers look legit," he said, and my heart soared for a second. "But Mrs. Vance here has documentation claiming this is HOA land. Her documentation is drawn with a crayon compared to the county deed," I argued, losing my cool. "Listen," the officer said, raising a hand. "We can't determine who owns what right here on the driveway. This is a property dispute. It's a civil matter. We can't kick you out, but we can't make her leave either if she claims administrative access. You guys need to take this to court." Civil matter. Those 2 words are the scariest words in the English language because they mean you are on your own. Patricia knew it. She smiled, a predatory grin that said she had just been given a green light to make my life hell. "Fine," she chirped. "If the officers won't enforce the standards, we will simply document the noncompliance." They left, but the war had just begun. That first night, we barely slept, every creak of the old house sounding like footsteps. Around 2 a.m., I saw headlights at the end of the driveway, just sitting there, high beams flooding our front yard, watching us. I went out to the porch, phone in hand, recording, and the car slowly backed away, vanishing into the dark. The next morning, the mailbox was empty, which was impossible because we were expecting mortgage papers. I called the post office, and the clerk, sounding bored, told me, "Sir, your mail has been forwarded to the Golden Oaks Central Office per the request on file." My hands started shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so hot it felt like heartburn. She was stealing our mail, she was stalking us, and she was doing it all under the guise of community management. I walked back inside, looked at Sarah, who was trying to make breakfast in a kitchen full of boxes, and I realized that Patricia Vance didn't want compliance, she wanted total submission. But she had made one critical mistake. She assumed I was just some random heir looking for a quick payout. She didn't know that I was stubborn. She didn't know that Uncle Ben had raised me to never back down from a bully. And she definitely didn't know that I was about to turn her little game of suburban chess into a full-blown revolution. The escalation didn't happen gradually. It was an avalanche. 2 days after the mail incident, I woke up to a sound that belongs on a construction site, not a residential driveway, the heavy, grinding roar of diesel engines. I ran outside in my boxers, stumbling into the morning light, and froze. There, blocking the entire width of my driveway, were two massive concrete jersey barriers, the kind used on highways, spray-painted with bright orange letters. HOA access only. Violators will be fined. Sarah came out behind me, holding Leo, and I saw the color drain from her face. This wasn't just annoying anymore. This was a siege. We were literally being walled in on our own property. I could feel the panic rising in my throat, the feeling of being trapped, but I shoved it down and replaced it with cold, hard strategy. "Take Leo inside," I told Sarah, my voice sounding strangely calm. "Don't let him see this." I pulled out my phone and started filming, narrating everything, the barriers, the paint, the lack of permits. I called a tow company, a local guy named Big Mike who I found on Yelp, and told him the situation. He laughed when I explained it was an HOA dispute, saying, "Son, if you sign the liability waiver, I'll drag those blocks to the moon." While Big Mike was hooking up the chains, making the concrete scream against the gravel, I uploaded the video to my social media. I titled it simply, "When the HOA Thinks They Own Your Soul." I didn't expect much, maybe a few likes from friends, but by the time the barriers were dumped on the public roadside, my phone was buzzing so hard it nearly fell off the table. 50,000 views. 100,000 views. People were enraged, commenters were screaming for justice, telling me to lawyer up, offering advice. That evening, as the sun dipped low, a young guy in a gray hoodie appeared at the edge of my property line. He looked terrified, constantly checking over his shoulder like he was waiting for a sniper to take him out. I walked down to meet him, keeping my distance. "Are you Marcus?" he whispered. "Yeah, who are you?" "I'm Tyler," he said, pulling his hood down. "I work for Golden Oaks, for Patricia. I can't do this anymore, man." He handed me a small, silver USB drive. His hands were trembling. "She's not just trying to annoy you," Tyler said, his voice cracking. "She's obsessed. There was a meeting. I accidentally recorded it on my phone. You need to hear it." We went inside, and I plugged the drive into my laptop. The audio was grainy, the sound of chairs scraping, and then Patricia's voice, unmistakable and icy, cut through the room. "He is a cancer to the aesthetic," the recording played. "If the police won't remove him, we will bury him. Generate violations every hour. Fines for the grass, the paint, the car. Make the financial pressure so heavy he begs to sell. I want him gone." Sarah covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. It wasn't just bureaucracy, it was a targeted hit. Tyler told us about the fake maps, how Patricia had pressured the board to redraw the lines simply because she hated the look of Uncle Ben's old cabin and wanted to annex the land for a scenic overlook. "Thank you, Tyler," I said, gripping his shoulder. "You just saved us." But Patricia wasn't done. The next morning, the final blow landed. I woke up to the sound of screaming. Not human screaming, but the mechanical shriek of chainsaws. I sprinted out the front door and saw a nightmare. A crew of men in neon vests was tearing through my garden. They were cutting down the ancient lilac hedges Uncle Ben had planted 30 years ago. Another guy was taking a sledgehammer to the wooden gazebo in the side yard. "Hey," I roared, sprinting barefoot across the grass. "Stop. What are you doing?" One of the workers paused, lifting his visor. "HOA beautification order," he shouted over the noise. "Removing non-compliant structures." And there she was, Patricia Vance, standing by her white Mercedes, holding a clipboard, watching the destruction with a look of pure, unadulterated satisfaction. "You're destroying my property," I screamed, lunging toward the gazebo, but two of her security goons stepped in my way, hands hovering over their belts. "We are mitigating eyesores," Patricia called out calmly. "Standard procedure for uncooperative residents." Sarah was on the porch, sobbing, holding Leo back. I called the police again. They arrived, saw the destruction, saw the sawdust and the broken wood, and the same defeated look crossed the deputy's face. "Ma'am, you can't just cut down his trees," the officer said. "It is community land," Patricia lied, smooth as silk. "We are authorized." "It's a civil dispute," the officer repeated to me, though he looked sick to his stomach saying it. "We can file a report for damage, but we can't arrest her without a court order determining the boundary." That was the breaking point. Standing there in the ruins of my uncle's garden, watching Patricia drive away victorious while my wife cried and my son shook with fear, something inside me snapped. But it wasn't a violent snap. It was the snapping of a lock falling into place. "Civil matter?" I whispered to the empty driveway. "Okay, let's get civil." I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I spent hours online, researching, until I found a name. Atticus Reed, a lawyer who didn't specialize in real estate. He specialized in scorched earth litigation against corporate bullies. He had a reputation for being a shark in a suit, a man who didn't just win cases, he dismantled the opposition. I walked into his office the next morning at 8 a.m. sharp, slapped the USB drive on his mahogany desk, showed him the viral video, and the photos of the destroyed gazebo. Atticus, a silver-haired man with glasses that hid eyes like flint, listened without interrupting. He watched the video. He listened to the recording of Patricia. He looked at the fake map. Then he slowly took off his glasses and smiled, a terrifyingly sharp smile. "Mr. Thorne," he said softly, "this isn't a property dispute. This is fraud, criminal conspiracy, destruction of property, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. You came here looking for a shield, but I think it's time we picked up a sword." "I don't just want them to stop," I said, my voice shaking with the memory of Leo's scared face. "I want to make sure they never do this to anyone else." Atticus nodded, opening a fresh legal pad. "Oh, don't worry. By the time we're done, Patricia Vance won't be the president of a book club, let alone an HOA." Walking into the county courthouse felt less like a legal proceeding and more like entering the Coliseum. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of floor wax and impending doom. Sarah held my hand so tight I thought she might break my fingers, but her head was high. We weren't the victims anymore. We were the hunters. Patricia Vance sat at the defense table, looking impeccable in a cream-colored suit, whispering to her lawyer with that same dismissive arrogance she'd worn on my driveway. She didn't look worried. In her mind, she was the queen of Golden Oaks, and we were just peasants who didn't understand the rules. The judge, Judge Harrow, was a terrifying woman with eyes that could cut glass. She sat down, arranged her robes, and looked over the filings. Atticus Reed stood up. He didn't shout. He didn't pace. He just projected the first slide onto the screen, the official county zoning map. "Your Honor," Atticus began, his voice smooth as bourbon, "this case is simple. It is a story of theft, not of jewelry or money, but of peace." He clicked the remote. The screen changed to the map Patricia had given the police. Then, he overlaid the metadata showing it had been edited in Photoshop on a computer registered to Patricia Vance. The courtroom murmured. Patricia shifted in her seat, her smile faltering for the first time. "Forgery," Atticus stated. Then he clicked again. The emails Tyler had provided. Chains of messages where Patricia admitted the land wasn't theirs but decided to annex it by force. "Conspiracy," Atticus said. Then came the video. The room went dead silent as they watched the chainsaws rip through my uncle's garden, watched my wife crying on the porch, watched Patricia smiling amidst the destruction. Judge Harrow leaned forward, her face darkening. And finally, Atticus said, "The intent." He played the audio recording. Patricia's voice filled the acoustic space of the courtroom, loud and clear. Bury him under a mountain of violations until he begs to leave. When the audio ended, the silence was absolute. You could hear the hum of the HVAC system. Patricia was pale, her hands trembling on the table. Her lawyer looked like he wanted to crawl under the bench. Judge Harrow took off her glasses and looked directly at Patricia. "Mrs. Vance, in my 20 years on the bench, I have seen incompetence, and I have seen malice. But I have rarely seen such a breathtaking combination of both." The gavel came down like a thunderclap. The judgment wasn't just a win, it was an obliteration. The judge dissolved the current board of Golden Oaks, placed the HOA under temporary receivership, ordered full restitution for the gazebo and the landscaping, and slapped Patricia with punitive damages that made the audience gasp. But the kicker came at the end. Because of the mail tampering, a federal crime, and the fraud, the judge ordered Patricia be taken into custody pending a criminal hearing. As the bailiff moved toward her, the Queen of Golden Oaks finally cracked. She started screaming that she was just trying to maintain order, that the world was chaotic and she was the only one holding it together. Later, we found out the truth. Patricia had lost her own son, Julian, years ago in a neighborhood accident, a place with no rules, no fences. Her grief had twisted into a need for absolute control. She wasn't just a tyrant. She was a broken mother trying to enforce safety on a world that had hurt her. It didn't excuse what she did to my family, not for a second, but it turned her from a monster into a tragedy. We rebuilt. The new gazebo was painted a deep ocean blue, just like Sarah wanted. We threw a barbecue a few months later, inviting the neighbors, the real ones, who had been too scared to speak up before. Tyler came, looking 10 years younger without the weight of secrets on his shoulders. Leo ran through the yard, laughing, the sound echoing off the new, sturdy fence that marked our land. I stood by the grill, watching the sun set over the pines, the golden light touching everything with a kind of holy grace. We had won. We had protected our home. But as I looked at the peace we had fought so hard for, I couldn't help but think about Patricia, sitting in a cell, convinced she was the hero of her own story. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? At what point does the desire for order become tyranny? We all want safe neighborhoods. We all want property values to stay up. But when does a rulebook become a weapon? Patricia thought she was fighting for the greater good, but she destroyed lives to do it. Is justice just about following the rules? Or is it about knowing when the rules are wrong? All I know is the only thing that matters is the laughter of my son in a yard that is finally, truly free. And that was worth every single battle.